سخنرانیهای سر آلن میل، جان پری، میشل مولهرين، مارتین ویکرز، مالکوم فاولر، طاهر بومدرا و دولت نوروزی در کنفرانس پارلمانی در لندن. دادخواهی شهیدان قتل عام ۶۷. قسمت هفتم.
Let me say at the very beginning of my address is that really the people of Iran have been very, very badly let down by the international community. I say that feeling extremely guilty about it because my own nation is part of that. They let the people down of Iran and all the victims and families which have to pay for the brutality of the Ayatollahs all those years ago. Now, allowing such in the international community is nothing short of a disgrace. And I say that because we should hang our heads in shame about this. Now, so far, the Revolutionary Guard and the mullahs have been responsible for tens of thousands of deaths and tortures and incarcerations throughout Iran. And we have stood, as I've said, idly by and acquiesced to their actions, doing very little, not even really sounding heavy terms that they should be cautious in proceeding with that. And I think it's time for it to stop. And what I do ask is three things, essentially, for the panel today. First of all, our governments and other Western democracies, particularly those who are members of the Security Council, should actually insist that the UN Security Council resolution against the regime must be reimposed. It's unthinkable that they'd even consider any lightening of those actions. And secondly, they must insist that the leadership of the Revolutionary Guard in particular must be held to account their actions during the last decades. And finally, we must do everything, not turn our eyes away, not turn a blind eye, as I said earlier. We must do everything in our powers to say we will fight for and be heard and take action to ensure there's a free and democratic Iran.
As the National Council of Resistance of Iran has repeatedly emphasized, there is a risk of a new wave of secret mass executions in Iran prisons. Yet the regime's officials and leaders in Tehran continue to enjoy impunity at the international level despite their well-documented involvement in serious human rights violations and crimes against humanity at home. On international level, so far, the United Nations has not carried out its long overdue duties in this regard. Therefore, we have to campaign to demand that all democratic governments, in particular the Western governments, do two. Number one, strongly condemn this heinous crime against humanity and launch their independent investigations and inquiries into. Number two, take this case to the courts with international jurisdictions, in particular the International Criminal Court in The Hague, and demand bringing the perpetrators to justice. Number three, implement diplomatic and economic sanctions on the Ayatollah's regime, similar to the successful policy of maximum pressure of the United States, as well as call upon the UN for further international sanctions on the regime. Through different resolutions, the bipartisan members of the United States Congress have condemned the human rights violations by the Iran regime, including the 1988 massacre. It is time that we on this side of the Atlantic, and especially in the EU and the UK, join them in support and send a strong message of solidarity to the people of Iran and send a strong message of condemnation to the Iranian regime and make sure that they understand that this time we mean business and we will not stop till we help the people of Iran and their legitimate resistance, the NCRI, achieve justice. Their ultimate goal of that is a democratic and free Iran. I believe the recent statement called "Listen to the Voice of the Iranian People" that is sponsored by well over 100 European and Arab parliamentarians to date is a powerful step in that direction. All Western democracies should take necessary measures to maintain an arms embargo on the brutal dictatorship of the Ayatollahs in Iran.
I believe when we see a government of a country turn on its own people, it is an obligation on the part of the international community to take action. And I would just like briefly just to say that I support the call for justice and accountability in relation to the 1988 massacres. There are families here who very much want to achieve justice, as we would all in these circumstances. And for my own part, I support the call and the efforts. And it is an issue that I have taken up in the past with our Minister for Foreign Affairs and the government, and I will continue to do so.
Why we must give maximum support to the NCRI. What we've heard from other contributions this morning yet again highlights the injustices and the evidence, the growing evidence, I think it's fair to say, that Iran is involved in warmongering activities in so many different parts of the world, causing instability and harm and danger to all of us. Again, as I have done on previous occasions, congratulate all the work of the NCRI. You've done so much here in the Houses of Parliament in Westminster to increase support amongst my colleagues. And I can assure you that I will continue to give you support and to help and increase that support here in Westminster. Thank you.
Martin Luther King said many wonderful and inspiring things, but one of the most momentous was this: our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Now then, these atrocious crimes against humanity of 1988 matter. They mattered then, they matter today, and they will matter for all our yesterdays. Atrocities continue as though they were perpetrated yesterday because they are still going on. We know about this from November last year. As we speak, atrocities are being perpetrated, and in all conscience, by law and in all morality, the flames are still being fanned by this vile regime. Every single minute we must live each day to eradicate this injustice. And you have my pledge and the pledge of many others. Thank you so much for giving me the time. I'm always so proud to be able to contribute in a however humble a way.
In fact, it's all said and well documented. There is a crime against humanity that took place. The United Nations have been informed. The successive special rapporteurs of the United Nations on the situation of human rights in Iran had consistently called on Iran to investigate such a crime. And what happened? The special rapporteur on the human rights situation in Iran has been banned from visiting Iran. So it's clear Iran is unwilling to investigate, and the United Nations has proven to be reluctant on imposing such an investigation. So my question is, what's next? The reality is that the coming United Nations resolution, General Assembly resolution, should focus on setting up a commission, an independent commission to investigate such a crime against humanity, rather than calling on the perpetrators themselves to investigate. Perpetrators are not willing. Iran is unwilling to investigate such a crime. Therefore, we have to be realistic and take action. I join my voice to previous voices who called for immediate action, but this action must not be calling on Iran to investigate itself. It must be for setting up an independent commission for investigation. Thank you.
I have to say, unfortunately, I have seen and witnessed the world community and some countries, and in my view, lobbies of policies of appeasement, calling for the lifting of the sanctions under the pretext that it would hurt or damage the Iranian people's life. But everyone knows that after the so-called nuclear agreement in 2015, it was much worse in terms of both social, political. The life of the Iranian people turned into much more misery and facing poverty almost in all various sectors of Iranian society because of huge corruption amongst various layers of this regime. They call that this actually corruption has been institutionalized. Many of officials of the regime acknowledged that huge amount of the money are in the hands of Khamenei, the supreme leader, and 5 major foundations related to him, at least some $200 billion are in the hands of Khamenei, and particularly its Revolutionary Guards Corps, or we call them Pastaran. And we have seen how they have been responsible in spending the money, not only for the suppression and repression of Iranian people, and that's why this regime is actually the #1 in terms of executions in the whole world per capita. I have to say that the world community should realize that the illusion is no longer valid. They have to see the reality, and they have to take very substantive steps in order to bring about justice and to punish this outlaw, inhumane regime. They call themselves a government, but they are not in no way representing the Iranian people. It is a creature, it's a beast. They should be called 7-headed dragons that only are responsible for terrible human rights violations and atrocities they committed against both Iranians and many people in the region. Justice needs to be done. Members of parliament in Europe, particularly the European Union, the United States, and all around the world, the Middle East, need to cry out. They need to shoulder stand with the Iranian people, demanding that the world community needs not to give any further concession to the mullahs, rather than giving them millions and billions of dollars in order to carry on with killing our youngsters, with killing Navid Afghari, and many, many thousands more of political prisoners or university students that just had the guts and the courage in order to stand up and cry for freedom, for a nation that only destroyed for justice and for humanity and human values. That needs to be respected. That needs to be supported by the world community, not criminals in the name of so-called a regime that we know only stays in power because of repression and terrorism. So what we need to call upon is for the United Nations, the Secretary General, various Secretary of State, whether in the United Kingdom or elsewhere in Europe. They need to stop giving concessions. We need the world community to take substantive steps, first of all, by supporting the NCRI, Maryam Rajavi, President, elect of this resistance movement for its platform to bring about democracy and freedom in Iran. Second, we need that the embassies of this regime to close down. They were the ones that wanted to bomb our gathering in Paris in 2018, the gathering in Albania in 2019. That regime and their so-called embassies and ambassadors must be expelled, and those actually embassies to close down, because they're not used for any diplomatic or any mutual interests and vital interests of the world community and relationship with other countries in the world. They are just made for them to carry on their plots, their bombings against Iranian dissidents and the world community. And many politicians around Europe that had the courage to stand with our movement. So what I need to ask you is to continue your efforts. Please stand with the Iranian people to continue supporting their uprising. Thank you so much for listening to me.